I
Yeah,
always
I've been
thought
thinking a lot
laundromats were
about
the
what you
loneliest
said,
places.
and I
Too
think
many
I
machines
finally
humming in
understand.
unison, the air thick with fabric softener, and no one really looking at each other. You just sit, waiting for the spin cycle to finish, scrolling on your phone without reading anything. That night, I had half a basket of clothes and an empty stomach, debating whether to buy the stale crackers from the vending machine. It wasn't late, but the place was nearly deserted. Just me, two college kids whispering over earbuds, and a woman folding towels at the far end. I'd seen her before, maybe twice. Always with the same steady rhythm, folding shirts into perfect squares, like she had nowhere to rush to, but also nowhere she wanted to stay. She must have been in her mid-40s. Her hair was pinned up that night, a few strands loose against her face. I looked away quickly, though not quick enough, because she caught me, and she didn't look away. "Yours are done," she said, nodding toward the machine I'd forgotten I was using. Her voice wasn't loud, just enough to cut through the dryers. I muttered a thanks, dragging my basket over. She didn't smile, not exactly, but there was a trace of amusement at my distraction. When I pulled out a t-shirt and fumbled with the folding, she laughed softly. Not at me, exactly. More like at the clumsy insistence of youth. "You fold like you're fighting the shirt," she said. I half grinned. "And you fold like it's an Olympic event." That made her laugh again, fuller this time, and for some reason I stored the sound away like it meant more than it should. We fell into silence after that, though it wasn't heavy. Just space. The hum of the dryers filled it, and I found myself stealing glances. The way her hands smoothed fabric, the small pause before she stacked each folded piece. Everything she did looked like habit, yet there was something deliberate in it. When I checked my phone, I noticed the draft of a text still sitting unsent. "You up?" Meant for someone else. I deleted it. By the time we both finished, the place was almost empty. She slipped her folded towels into a cloth bag, neat as everything else about her. At the door, she hesitated, then looked back. "You live in the building across the street, don't you?" I nodded, surprised she'd noticed. "I thought so. You're the one always carrying takeout upstairs." "Busted," I said, a little embarrassed. "Nothing wrong with it," she replied. "Just, sometimes I wonder how anyone eats that many dumplings." It was such a small line, but it felt like she'd been watching me longer than I'd realized. Like I wasn't as invisible as I thought. She lifted her bag then, a polite half-wave. "See you around." And that should have been it. Just a neighborly exchange. But when I reached home, balancing my clean clothes in one arm, I saw my phone light up. A message from a number I didn't know. "Next time, bring the dumplings. I'll make the tea." I stared at it, heartbeat a little louder than usual, caught between disbelief and curiosity. The college kids at the laundromat probably didn't even notice her. But me, I couldn't stop noticing. And I wasn't sure if that text meant she'd noticed me too, or if it was something else entirely. Either way, it felt like the kind of thing you don't just ignore. I didn't reply right away. The text sat there all night, glowing in my mind even after the screen went dark. "Next time, bring the dumplings. I'll make the tea." By the third reread, it felt like an invitation, though not the kind people usually mean. Something softer, something careful. 2 evenings later, I found myself climbing the narrow stairs of her building, the warm paper bag of dumplings leaving faint grease marks on my hand. My pulse felt louder than the creak of each step. Her apartment door was already open when I reached it, like she had been waiting. She wore a loose sweater, sleeves pushed back, her hair unpinned this time. The smell of jasmine tea drifted out. "You actually came," she said, as if she'd half expected me not to. "You actually texted." I answered, trying not to sound like I'd been thinking about it for days. We ate at her small table, two mismatched chairs pulled close. She poured the tea carefully, the steam fogging her glasses. It was quiet, but not awkward. Just the kind of quiet where you notice the scrape of chopsticks, the faint tick of the clock above the sink. At some point, I told her about the first time I moved into the city. About sitting alone with instant noodles, staring at walls that didn't feel like mine yet. She nodded, staring into her cup. "I know that feeling. When my marriage ended, I couldn't sleep in my own bed for weeks." The silence was too loud. It wasn't what I expected her to say. Her tone wasn't bitter, just matter of fact, like she'd folded the memory neatly and put it on a shelf. But the way she said it stayed with me. I caught myself wondering about the man who used to sit where I was sitting. If he had held this same cup, heard her laugh at the same distance. The thought made me feel strange, too young. out of place. A part of me wanted to apologize, though I wasn't sure for what. She must have sensed it. "You don't have to look so guilty," she said, half smiling. "I wasn't, I lied." "Yes, you were." She tapped the rim of her cup gently. "It's all right. Most people are." We let the conversation fade after that, but the silence wasn't empty. My mind kept looping. Her voice, her hands, the word marriage lingering like steam above the tea. When I stood to leave, I helped her carry the dishes to the sink. She reached to take the plates from me, and for a second our hands touched. Barely, just the brush of skin. Nothing cinematic. Yet it landed heavier than it should have, like an anchor in water. She didn't move her hand away right away. Just let it stay for half a heartbeat too long. Then she cleared her throat, took the plates, and said with a small laugh, "Careful. I might start expecting dumplings every week." It sounded like a joke, but I walked back to my building with the warmth of her hand still burning into mine, wondering if it had meant more than either of us was ready to admit. The dumplings became a kind of ritual. Not every night, not even every week, but enough that I started carrying the paper bag up her stairs like it belonged there. She always had the kettle on, like she'd been expecting me. One evening, though, something shifted. I found her on the balcony, leaning against the railing, cigarette in hand though it wasn't lit. She waved me in, but didn't move to follow. Her sweater hung loose on her frame, and for the first time I noticed the lines around her mouth, tired but softened by the porch light. "You're late," she said, not accusing, just stating it. "Bus ran slow." She nodded, tapping the cigarette against her palm. "I thought maybe you wouldn't come." It sounded casual, but the word stuck. I wanted to say I'd never not come. Instead, I shrugged. "You really want cold dumplings?" That earned me the faintest smile, but she didn't take the bag. Just looked past me, back into the apartment, where 2 mugs sat already waiting on the table. Inside, we sat without much talk. She seemed distracted, folding and unfolding the napkin in her lap. I caught her looking at me more than once, quick glances that pulled away too fast. "Finally," she said, "you're too young for this." It wasn't a question. I tried to laugh it off. Too young for tea and dumplings? Her eyes flickered up. "Serious. You know what I mean." I didn't answer, because what was there to say? She wasn't wrong. The silence grew heavy, pressing against the tick of the wall clock. That was when the knock came at her door. Sharp, too loud in the quiet. She froze. I saw her whole body tense before she stood and smoothed her sweater. Opening it just enough, she spoke in a hushed voice I couldn't catch. Then a younger woman's laugh spilled into the room. Carefree, familiar. "Nora, I knew you'd be home. You always are." Her niece. I'd seen her once, in passing, same dark hair, but years younger. She peered past the doorway, spotted me at the table. Her eyebrows lifted, amused. "Company? Well, isn't that interesting?" Nora, her name. I hadn't heard it until then. She didn't explain, didn't introduce me. Just held her niece's gaze until the girl chuckled and waved off the tension. "Don't let me interrupt. I'll text you later." The door shut. Quiet again, but not the same quiet. She didn't meet my eyes after that. Just picked up her mug, fingers tight around the handle. I wanted to tell her I didn't care, that it wasn't what it looked like. But the words jammed in my throat. Instead, I leaned closer, low enough for my arm to brush hers as I reached for my own cup. The touch lingered, almost accidental, almost not. She didn't pull away. Her breath caught, barely, but I heard it. For a second, I thought she might turn toward me. And for a second, I wanted nothing more. But then she stood, sudden, carrying her cup to the sink. "We should eat before it gets cold." It was nothing, just an ordinary line. But the space she put between us said everything else. It rained that week. The kind of steady drizzle that blurred the city into smudges of gray. I found her outside the corner store, umbrella tilted against the wind, waiting for the light to change. She noticed me before I said anything. Just the faint lift of her brow, like she wasn't surprised. We ended up walking together, no plan, just 2 people heading in the same direction. Our shoulders nearly touched under the narrow umbrella. "You don't usually shop here," I said, trying to make it casual. They had my tea, the one that always sells out. She held the small paper bag like it was fragile. For a while, the only sound was the water rushing along the curb. I wanted to say something easy, but instead I asked, "Why did you never remarry?" Her step faltered. She didn't answer right away. "You say that like it's something everyone is supposed to do." "I didn't mean, I know." She exhaled slow. It wasn't that I couldn't. I just didn't want to spend years teaching someone how to love me properly, only to find out they couldn't. Her voice was calm, but the words left me raw. We reached the small park, benches slick with rain. She sat anyway, brushing water off with her hand. I sat too, damp jeans and all. I stared at her profile, the way the raindrops clung to her hairline, how she held herself so carefully still. And before I could stop myself, sometimes I wonder what you see when you look at me. She turned, startled. Her lips parted, but no answer came. Just her gaze, steady, searching mine like she wanted to find the right lie and couldn't. That night, I pressed. When your niece came, the way she looked at me, like I didn't belong here. Like I wasn't. You don't, she cut in softly. You don't belong here. That's the problem. The words landed heavy. But beneath them, something else flickered. Fear, not rejection. I laughed once, short and sharp. You think I don't know the difference? That I don't see it every time someone looks at us? Her hand tightened around the umbrella handle. Then why keep coming back? Because of you. Because the silence with you is the first silence that doesn't feel like loneliness. Because I can't stop. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, the truth slipped out in a low murmur. Because it feels worse not to. She stared at me for a long time. Then, slowly, she set the umbrella down on the wet bench, rain slipping between us now. Her hand hovered, almost reaching mine, almost closing the distance. Her voice was barely above the rain. You shouldn't say things like that. And yet, she didn't move away. The air between us hummed, charged, waiting. I leaned in, just a fraction, enough for her breath to touch my skin. It could have happened then. It almost did. But she closed her eyes, not in surrender, more like holding back a flood. We should go, she whispered. And the moment broke, still echoing as the rain carried us back into the blur of the street. For a week, I didn't see her. No light in her window at night. No sound of her kettle through the wall. Even the faintest trace of her presence, the smell of tea drifting down the stairwell, was gone. I told myself it was nothing. People get busy. People take trips. But the quiet felt heavier than it should. On the 8th night, I saw her at the mailbox. She didn't notice me at first, hair tied back, shoulders hunched, bills tucked under her arm. When she did, she startled, like I'd caught her doing something she shouldn't. You've been gone, I said before I could stop myself. I had things, she replied, flat, clipped. Not unkind, but not the same woman who used to wait with the kettle ready. I almost asked what things. Instead, I stuffed my own mail under my arm and followed her into the stairwell. Halfway up, she slowed. My son was visiting. I stopped mid-step. You have a son? She nodded, not looking back. He's 22. He doesn't live here. But when he visits, I don't. I can't, she trailed off, her hand tight on the railing. It was like the ground shifted beneath me. A son, older than me by 2 years, or close enough. The weight of it pressed in hard, sharper than anything we hadn't said out loud. I didn't know what to do with my hands, my eyes, my voice. So I just stood there, trying to look composed while inside something unraveled. She must have seen it on my face. You understand why this can't, why it shouldn't, her voice broke off again. But the words stayed. Can't, shouldn't. They echoed louder than the stairwell's silence. I wanted to tell her it didn't matter, that I wasn't her son, that what we had, or almost had, wasn't the same thing. But my throat closed, and all I managed was a thin, yeah, I get it. She gave a tight nod, then climbed the last few steps, disappearing into her door without looking back. That night, I drafted a message. It doesn't have to be like this. I don't care about the age, the son, the rules. I just don't care. But my thumb hovered over send until the screen dimmed. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. The next night, I didn't go to the laundromat. I didn't stop by the corner store. I didn't even glance at her window. And yet, when I passed the bench in the park, rain-soaked and empty, I caught myself slowing down. Just in case she was there. But she wasn't. And I kept walking, the unsent message still glowing in my pocket, as if waiting for her to finish it instead. It didn't happen all at once. There wasn't a night when we finally kissed and everything changed, no sudden declaration that rewrote our lives. It was slower than that, quieter, the kind of shift you don't notice until you look back. I still remember the first time I saw her waiting at the park bench instead of me. It was 8:47 in the morning, on a Saturday, drizzle hanging in the air like a half-formed thought. She sat there with her thermos of tea, steam curling against the gray, and when I approached, she just patted the spot beside her. No words, no hesitation. That small gesture felt like more than any confession could. After that, we fell into a rhythm. Dumplings some nights, black coffee others. Sometimes she'd let me talk about the future I wasn't sure of, and sometimes she'd let the silence do the work instead. Her silence never felt empty anymore. It felt like space I'd been missing. She didn't stop being careful. She'd still glance around the laundromat before sitting near me. She still avoided long explanations when her niece or son asked questions she didn't want to answer. But the difference was, she let me stay. She let me be part of the quiet corners of her life, the places where she could put her guard down without saying so. I learned her habits in fragments. How she always measured the tea leaves with the same small spoon. How she pretended to dislike black coffee, but drank half my cup anyway. How she folded shirts on autopilot, except mine. Those she slowed down with, smoothing the fabric like it mattered. There were days when I thought too hard about the gap between us. About time, about what other people might say, about the versions of her life I'd never touched. But whenever the doubt settled in, it would be undone by something small. A smile she gave without thinking. The brush of her hand when she passed me a mug. Her voice calling me by name in a way no one else did. I think what we built wasn't about ignoring the risks. It was about carrying them together, gently, the way you carry something fragile. Months passed, and the city didn't notice us. The neighbors didn't stop to stare. The laundromat stayed noisy, the park stayed wet, the kettle kept whistling at the same times. Ordinary life went on. But inside it, between us, something steady grew. Not dramatic, not perfect, just earned. One night, sitting on the bench again, she handed me her thermos. "Try this," she said, watching closely. I took a sip. The tea was strong, almost bitter. "Not bad," I said, handing it back. She smiled in that quiet way of hers, the corners of her mouth barely moving. "You're getting used to it." And that was the kind of thing only we would understand. Sparkles, did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?